Ladies and gentlemen, coming to the stage, put your hands together for Sam White.
It's 1989. I'm 8 years old. I'm sitting in my room. I love rap music, the lyrics, the vowels, the syllables. I'm listening to Salt and Pepper's Push It. Dun, 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 dun. Push it good, dun, 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 dun. Oh, push it real good. When I hear a knock at my door, I knew who it was because she hated rap music. It was my mother. She knocked at the door once, a really firm knock. She knocked at the door again. That knock got even firmer. I was scared. I knew she was gonna kill me, but I had to open the door because it was my mom, so I slowly but surely opened it. I was ready for my whooping or my verbal lashing, but she stood there instead, tall as the Renaissance building, or so it felt like, with a halo of blonde hair around her head, and she had a book in her hands. And she handed it to me, this big old smelly book, and said, if you like lyrics so much, read this. I looked at the book. The title was The Complete Works of William Shakespeare. I went back into my room, sat on that same spot where I was listening to Salt and Pepper's Push It, opened the book, and I started fiddling through the pages. And I couldn't understand a word. But over time, I would fiddle through those pages some more and fiddle through those pages some more. And it only took 8 years, but by the time I was 16, I had fallen in love with Shakespeare. Those lyrics, those vowels, those syllables. Now that kind of took a back seat because I had been dancing since I was 3 years old. And then when I turned 21, I decided I was going to be an actor. So I walked into St. Dunstan's Theater Guild at Cranbrook and I asked them, hey, can I be an actor? Can I join your group? And they said, absolutely. And then by the time I was 26, I decided I was going to be a stand-up comedian. Because as Shakespeare wrote in Julius Caesar, it's not in the stars to hold our destiny, but in ourselves. And so I thought I had it in me to be the second coming of Rodney Dangerfield. So I packed up my Saturn Ion with everything that I owned, and I drove cross-country to Las Vegas to be a stand-up comic. I didn't get one gig, y'all. I didn't get not one gig. I ended up getting a job instead at the public radio station and the classical station for Vegas and Henderson, KNPR and KCNV. And my friend Sarah, she asked me one day, because she had been given the responsibility of planning a trip with some of our listeners from Vegas down to Utah for the Utah Shakespeare Festival. She said, Sam, do you want to come? And I said, absolutely, I like Shakespeare, let's go. And so we went with some of our listeners, and we saw 2 or 3 shows. And in the middle of Cedar City, Utah, there's sun, there's mountains, and there's Shakespeare. And I looked around and I thought, okay, if they can do this in the middle of the desert, then we can do this in Detroit, where we have tons of places that would be perfect for Shakespeare. We have Grand Circus Park, we have New Center Park, we got Peterson Park on 7 Mile and Greenfield, we have Wells Castle, we have the Jam Handy, we have Recycle here. I gotta go home and start a Shakespeare company. So I drove home in 2008, and that was a bad idea. The automotive industry was failing. People were just trying to survive, and so I ended up just trying to survive, finding a place to live and a way to feed myself. So I had to, as Shakespeare wrote in Henry V, there is nothing so becomes a man as modest stillness and humility. But when the blast of war blows in our ears, then imitate the action of the tiger. It was time to imitate the action of the tiger in 2012. I heard of this really cool place called Tech Town in Midtown Detroit. For people like me who had an idea but they didn't know what to do with it. Maybe people who had business ideas but they didn't know how to kickstart those things. And so I went. And when I was there, I created a feasibility plan and a business plan for a Shakespeare company. And I took that plan around to anybody who would listen. And then a year later, I met my angel I call her my fairy theater godmother, Njia Kai. And she said, you know, I'm with the Detroit 300 Conservancy, and we're trying to revitalize this park called Grand Circus Park. That's the patch of green right outside of Comerica Park. And that might be the best place for you to start. You could do your show there, your first show. And I said, absolutely. We'll do Othello at Grand Circus Park. A few weeks after that, the city filed for bankruptcy. I have great timing. And I thought to myself, oh God, nobody is gonna care that a little black girl from 7 Mile wants to start a Shakespeare company. The city can't even pay its bills. Nobody's gonna show up to see Othello except my mama. I knew she'd come, and maybe some squirrels in the park, but I didn't know if anybody else would show up. But on August 13th, 2013, I looked out right before Othello, and there were 500 people there. People of all races, people of all ages, people of all economic levels, people from the city, from outside the city, from Canton to Canada, West 7 Mile to West Bloomfield. They were all there to see this thing, this beautiful thing, happening in the city for the first time. Shakespeare in the Park in Detroit. That was motivation. That was inspiration to keep going, and so we did. In our first season at Shakespeare in Detroit, 3,000 people came out to see our shows. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. And then I got a phone call from Southwest Airlines. They had heard about our troupe and all the excitement that we were creating in the city with Shakespeare performing in all of these cool places, and they said, can we come cover you? Absolutely, you can come cover me. We want to put you on the cover of our in-flight magazine. So when people sat in their chairs on a Southwest flight and then they reached into that front pocket, they'd see me. And then if they flipped open the pages, they'd see my beautiful actors. Then they said they were going to send Chris Chrisman to photograph us. Now, Chris Chrisman, I knew exactly who he was when they told me that. He had taken pictures of one of my favorite performers, Alan Cumming, my favorite host of the musical cabaret. Welcome, the Avenue, welcome. He was photographing me now. He came, he took a photograph of me on top of the Madison building. I was dressed like Queen Elizabeth, a little black Queen Elizabeth. I had on my ruff, my corset, my big skirt, and my hat. It was fabulous. And then within the pages were my beautiful, beautiful troupe of actors. We waited and waited for that magazine to come out, and finally it did in February 2015. I was so excited. I was so grateful. It was a miracle until one of my actors told me to go to this guy's Facebook page. He sent me a message that, for some reason, I had been posted on someone's Facebook page. Now, I knew who the guy was because I had some familiarity with his name because he was in the theater community, but I didn't know him. Anyway, I went to his page, and there I was, posted on his page with 90 negative comments below that picture of me on the cover of that magazine. Who does she think she is? Other people have been doing Shakespeare long before she came along. She should be ashamed of herself. I wouldn't have posted this on Facebook. The only reason she got it, they insinuated, was because of the color of my skin. Now, that's very interesting because Shakespeare did not include women in his productions, and he definitely did not include people of color. In fact, it took 200 years from the time that he wrote Othello for a black actor to play a Moor. That actor's name was Ira Aldridge. So it was a miracle that this girl from Detroit, this black woman, had started a Shakespeare company and was the artistic director. They should be happy for me because my success is their success. I couldn't understand why all of these strangers were saying all of these awful things about this miracle that had happened to somebody like me. I was frustrated. I was upset, and I was very, very angry. We went on to keep producing shows because that's what you do. We even won an award for the show that came out right after that magazine. The director won an award, and then one of the actors from the show won an award as well. But I didn't care because I was still bitter about all those comments on this guy's page from all these people. And we continued on, eventually engaging with about 8,000 people. And one day, a little kid came up to me, a 13-year-old kid from Finkel and Hubble. And he walked up to me and said, "Miss Sam, I'd really love to learn Shakespeare, and can I be in your next play?" And when a kid asks you, can they learn Shakespeare, you have to say yes. And so I did. His mother came right behind him and said, because he saw someone who looked like him, he thought, well, if she can learn it, then I can too. And so I gave this kid the script for The Merchant of Venice. And he ended up playing Leonardo in our last production at New Center Park. He had lines and everything. He knew that play better than anybody. Talk about learning English. Talk about performing arts. Talk about history and social studies. Because he saw someone who looked like him. That moment reminded me that it wasn't about producing shows. It wasn't about people's comments. It's about being able to give this gift of language, of words, of syllables. The same gift that my mother gave to me, I was able to give to him. And yes, I still love hip hop. Because there's no difference between Shakespeare's to be or not to be, that is the question, or Eminem's I am whatever I say I am. If I wasn't, then why would I say I am? Those lyrics, those words, those syllables, those are my soul food. Thank you.
Sam White, Shakespeare in Detroit.